Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this evening's live stream. I am joined by not one, but two special guests this evening who are coming on to talk about some particular issues. We've got Phil Tanzer and we've got Ewan Morris. But just while we're warming up and a few more people are tuning in, I'll talk about a couple of issues to get us going, just get the comments on. So do fire away with the comments. I thought I'd start with a little clip from the BBC. It's always good to see the positive, wholesome, pro-family messages coming from the BBC. So as the nation faces demographic catastrophe, let's see what the BBC is putting out on their social media. This is a clip from a longer interview, but they thought this bit was so good that they would put it out, especially on their social media, under the title, Kids Ruin Everything. So, latest from the BBC.
Politics, not mix.
I think this is just another sign. It's another proven thing that kids ruin everything. Okay, like I think that's fair, isn't it? Kids ruin things. This was a dream to do this, right? I remember, no, genuinely, I remember asking my mother when I was very young. I was about 4 years of age, and I think I asked my mother a silly question one day. I was like, "Oh, mama, why are dogs so happy?" Because I saw some dogs playing in the park. I was like, "Why are dogs so happy?" And she said, "Because somebody takes their children away from them when they're born."
Absolutely hilarious, eh? Absolutely hilarious. Now, imagine a joke like that being made about another group. You hear about children's rights, trying to treat children like as an oppressed group. But would you get away with making a joke like that about, I don't know, Muslims, gay people, women? Probably not. But it seems like children are fair game with the BBC, with a thing like that. Absolutely appalling, but that's just par for the course. We know what they're like, don't we? Right, I'll cover another couple of things. This was just a very quick story. I quite like this story. This was a mosque somewhere near Liverpool, I understand, and some sort of anti-immigration, illegal immigration, whatever, sort of protesters like stuck a Union Jack on the mosque. I assume as like an aggressive act, like, ha, we'll show them, these Muslims, who's boss around here. And the Muslims in the mosque actually took it and put it up in their window. I said, well, that's great, because we're really proud to be British as well. So thanks for giving us the Union Jack. We'll display it on the inside instead of the outside. I thought that was quite nice. Now, I'm sure there'll be some people who will find it very difficult to be able to bear anything like that. And they'll want to say, oh, but. I mean, but surely that story in itself is quite it was good. It's quite an encouraging little snippet there. This is interesting as well. White working class school children punished more than any other group. This is from some statistics recently published. Now, what response is that headline designed to elicit? Is it designed to make you think, oh, right, there's some sort of discrimination against white working class school children? Or is it supposed to make you think, oh, well, they must be the naughtiest. If they're getting punished the most, they must be the naughtiest. Now, I feel that it's veering towards a little bit. So this is the victim group. They're being mistreated in some way. I'd be interested to know what the other groups were that were being assessed. Is it only white children that are divided into like working class and middle class or whatever? Are they then compared with like black, Asian? Who knows? Who knows what other groups there might be? But I didn't really like that take. Now, I think there are genuine issues about with white working class children. A lot of it's to do with family breakdown, cultural issues. It's also to do with, to some degree, an environment in which anyone and everything else is celebrated, apart from the white working class British school child who might be looked down upon a little bit. But I would say, looking at that headline, I would think the response to that isn't to try and like play the social justice sort of angle, that the white working class school child it's like an oppressed group who need to be liberated. And I'm sure virtually all these punishments would very much have been deserved. Like I would guarantee boys are punished more than girls in schools, and that's because boys are naughtier than girls, and they need bringing into line, and they need a bit of firm guidance often. So it's not any sort of injustice. Anyway, so I was just slightly concerned. I just felt that headline was trying to portray that as an injustice, and it might well not be. Right. I would say Muslims believe the Quran is the only government, not voters. That's debatable. There's a range of views about that. Right, so let's see what's maybe one more. We'll save that one. I've mentioned a couple of times recently that the Humanist Society of Scotland seems to be coming back to life after a dormant spell. They used to be pretty prominent, campaigning on this, that, and the other, and then they've gone quiet, and they seem to be getting going again. Well, the media seem to be giving them airtime again. Now, what do they campaign on? I mean, their whole point is that they don't need religion. They can be good people without religion. Yet they spend all their time trying to just do the opposite of whatever religious people do and attacking religious things. And the latest thing is religious observance in schools. Now, at the moment, religious observance in most mainstream, like non-Catholic schools in Scotland, religious observance, if you look at the guidelines for it, it's not really religious observance. It's like time for reflection. It's called religious observance, but it really isn't. But pupils can be opted out of it by their parents, or I think they could do it themselves as well if they're older. And of course, the humanist thinks it's an injustice that some children in Scotland, basically, they go to an assembly and there might be some Christian content in it, and they think, this is compulsion. This is something very bad. Now, what do I feel about that? I think some religious teaching, some Christian principles and messages in schools could be very positive. My fear is, in a lot of schools, they won't have anyone to genuinely deliver a message that they personally believe. And if it's just some sort of moral message with a Christian veneer on it by someone who not really a Christian, doesn't really have a faith, then that's probably counterproductive. It's more of an inoculation than anything else. So I'm not someone who's hugely enthusiastic about trying to pressurize schools into having explicitly Christian worship or more of it, because I think if you haven't got the staff to do it, I mean, how are you supposed to do it? It's just going to end up a facade and embarrassment. It's not going to be a positive thing. If it provides opportunities for the presentation of that genuine faith and good Christian principles, then all to the good. But anyway, the humanists are on the case. This is from the report. According to the most recent census data, the majority of school-aged children in Scotland are non-religious. Okay, I'm not particularly surprised by that, which has prompted groups such as the Humanist Society of Scotland and their campaign partner Together, Scottish Alliance for Children's Rights. Whenever you see children's rights, you can always guarantee they're going to be on the wrong side of the argument, whatever the issue is. To question whether the current implementation of religious observance, particularly when it is predominantly Christian in nature, is compromising children's rights to be respected and included. Right, now you see what's totally absent there. I mean, the purpose of Christian religious observance was that this is an important set of principles, life philosophy, spiritual message as well. This is very important, and it is to the benefit of the children, whether they realize it or not. And a huge majority of education should be provided on that basis, that the adults know what's going to be of benefit for children. Children are not really experts in what type of education is going to benefit them in the longer term. They're not the experts in what they need to learn as well. That's really the adults' job. But the humanists and the children's rights advocates, they want to say it's all up to children. And if you say to them, do you want some sort of religious observance? Probably a lot of them are going to say no. Now, if you look at the cross-section of MSPs in the Scottish Parliament, I mean, can they, in good faith, say they support religious observance in schools? I mean, not really. There's a time for reflection in the Scottish Parliament that's usually pretty weak liberal sort of waffle. Sometimes there's a good message, but virtually none of the MSPs turn up to it. A very small audience for it. So I think religious observance in schools, it is a bit anachronistic, but it is potentially a very positive thing where it can be done well, where it can be done sensibly and genuinely, authentically. And the last thing here, so that our Children's Commissioner of Scotland has weighed into it. Religious observance, religious education are not the same thing. Well, we all know that. Yeah. Now, just to clarify, the Children and Young People's Commissioner, she's someone who is like elected by children and young people by popular votes to represent their views. No, not at all. The reason we have a Children and Young People's Commissioner is that we're signed up to the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child. And if you do that, you have to have a Children's Commissioner as part of the package. That's why we have to have an Equality and Human Rights Commission, because the United Nations says so, because we're signatories to the United Nations Convention of Human Rights. So you have to have an Equality and Human Rights Commission. Similarly, if you signed up to the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, you have to have a Children and Young People's Commissioner. And what's their job? Their job is basically to listen to the United Nations and tell the people of Scotland and the Scottish government what they should do. So she's a communication channel from the United Nations to Scotland and the Scottish government. I would prefer the Scottish government to listen to the people of Scotland, but her post is designed to take their attention away from that. Who's the Scottish government more concerned about staying on the right side of and getting a pat on the head from? The United Nations or the people of Scotland? Those ordinary people scattered around. Well, obviously, the United Nations. So we'll watch this space and see what happens. Correct. I mean, there are plenty of substitute religions in Scottish schools. The main one, of course, is human rights. Human rights is the religion substitute of Scottish education. It is woefully inadequate as a moral foundation, moral philosophy for life, but that is what they have got. Right, though, Jack. Okay, Greece is collapsing with low birth rate. Yes, as are lots of other places. Spain has reversed its decline with births, with £173 per month family allowance. I mean, the family allowance in Britain isn't it like £135 a month? 173 in Spain is probably worth a bit more than that. But yeah, increased family allowances certainly are going to help. Right, it is time for our first guest of the evening. So after a little bit of a break, I haven't been off. Right, welcome, Phil.
Good evening. Good to see you, Richard.
I bet you enjoyed the video about kids ruin everything at the beginning. With your 3 daughters?
I think there's nothing better than having children. I think it's a fair assessment that there are many things that you can't focus on as much when you have children, because children are the most important thing in life. I mean, they are our future. They are the only miracle that we as humans can participate in, I believe. So, like, viewing children as burden, and I think our society has been doing that for a very long time, especially towards women, is quite satanic, to be quite frank.
Yeah. But what do you think about what I said about? Could you imagine that sort of humor about another group in society? Because potentially people would say that's. I'm not saying that they've got a reason, but people would object to that type of humor as being very offensive about some other groups.
I think that the humor is actually not so much targeted towards or against the children. I think the humor is much more targeted towards and against parents and potential parents. So I don't think that it's really there to demonize children that are already there, but it's there to demonize the potential of children, which I mean, you just mentioned, or one of the viewers mentioned the declining birth rate in Greece, and it's the same all over in the Western world, and that is, I think, in big parts due to the demonization of parenthood.
Yeah. Right. So let's move on to our main topic to discuss, and that is freedom of speech. There've been a few issues in the news, and there are a few angles to look at. So let's start with number one. Lucy Connolly, who, as I'm sure people will remember, last year when there were the riots following the Southport murders, she said something like, go and set fire to asylum seeker hotels with the. Okay, correct me.
To the best of my knowledge, she said, like, if people set fire to mosques, do something. She said, "For all I care." So I don't care if people set fire to mosques, for all I care. Something along those lines, if I'm not mistaken. So she did.
And the hotels with people in them.
Uh,
Definitely in there as well.
So and that's where legal things are quite subtle. And I think there is a difference between saying burn hotels, or I don't care if people burn hotels. And I especially also taken into account when she wrote this tweet, which was the same day that the 3 children were stabbed and killed. And she deleted it after a very, very short time. So I do think these things have to be taken into consideration. And the fact that, to my knowledge, she expressed that she wouldn't care if people set fire to hotels with people, and so she wouldn't object to that. And I mean, if people say, honestly, I don't care if Gaza is being bombed, or I don't care if Ukraine is being bombed, I don't care if babies are aborted. So that's because that's the next point. How about saying, I don't care if babies are aborted. I don't care if people die of COVID. I don't care. There is a comparison to that. Well, yeah, there is a comparison to that. Do you have to care about the suffering of people? And I'm not sure you can be compelled to care about the suffering of people.
Right. I would say, if you imagine someone was in a dispute with you, and let's say there was a lot of strength of feeling up in Donetsk, that Philip Tanzer hatred was really in full flow, and someone said, I wouldn't care if someone went and burnt his whole house down. I would say it's reasonable to look at that in the light to say, does that amount to incitement? Or if someone had tried, let's say there'd been 2 attempts to already do that, and you said someone said that they wouldn't care if someone had another go and succeeded in burning your house down.
Honestly, I wouldn't appreciate it. It would personally hurt me, but I don't think it's incitement to violence. I really don't. Now the question is, even if it was, so I think that I think the way that people are punished nowadays for tweets, I understand it from the perspective of the government, because I think the government is absolutely terrified, and for a very good reason. I think we're at the brink of civil unrest. I mean, we already have civil unrest, to be honest, and I think we are at the brink of really horrible things happening, including people burning police cars, people setting fires to asylum hotels and mosques. I think all of that will happen in the foreseeable future if there isn't a strong course correction. So I do understand that the government tries everything to stop to stop civil unrest. But I think by reacting very heavy-handed and not listening to the people, they do the exact opposite. I think they are sealing off a pressure cooker, and the pressure inside is just building up, and at one point it will explode. And I have many conversations with people in my shop, and many very, very normal people have the opinion that will happen, and it probably has to happen. And these are not people that are politically on the right. These are people, just normal people, that can tell that something is about to happen. And many say, well, it probably has to happen because the state of our country our union it's unattainable, and it probably can't be saved. So an explosion now is probably better than an even bigger explosion down the road. Now, when
Just
people
go
say,
back to the
Yeah.
I've got the exact text here. So
Thank
she
you.
said, mass deportations now. Set fire to all the effing hotels full of the For All I Care. If that makes me racist, so be it. So it was, yeah, For All I Care. I think on
Okay,
this,
but-
hang on. My point isn't so much that. Well, I would say, look at that tweet. Is it possible that might have been seen as incitement in the context? Possibly.
Yeah,
mean, she
I agree.
deleted it quickly. So for the police to be taking an interest in this, I think is reasonable. Do I think the sentence seems very harsh? I do.
Mm.
But the point I was more interested in is that the fact that Lucy Connolly was given a standing ovation at the Reform UK Party conference, and I think that is totally out of order, because the only reason she's come to prominence is for putting out a very unpleasant tweet that even she acknowledges was wrong. So even if Reform UK want to make a big thing that she was mistreated, she shouldn't be being given a round of applause and treated as a hero at their conference. I think that's totally wrong. And it sets the precedent for people. I mean, this is the problem with this sort of censorship, is it sets a precedent, and for other people, it shows them the route to a platform and influence is to say something totally off the wall, end up prosecuted or whatever, and that's the route to prominence. So more and more people think, oh, I'll do that. I'd like to be on the stage at the Reform conference. I'd like to be a public figure. I'd like to be going to meet the American government, which Nigel Farage said he wanted to take her to meet the American government. So all I need to do is to put out some utterly appalling tweet, and maybe that will be my riches. So, but do you agree that Reform were totally out of order?
I don't see it this way. Now, I have huge problems with Reform. I think they are they are a real danger because they are incapable of forming a government, and I despise Nigel Farage. And everything that I saw from the Reform Party conference, I strongly disliked. With the standing ovation, she did not get a standing ovation, just like Trump is not celebrated as the person who he is in America. Both Lucy Connolly and Donald Trump are placeholders for something that people have strong views about. So they are avatars. And it doesn't matter what Lucy Connolly did. I understand your concerns about it, but Lucy Connolly is now an avatar for somebody who was treated too harshly for a tweet. People don't really care what the tweet was. All they care about and all they know is that she got a very long sentence, being a mom of a few kids, and she took it down. So I'm okay with it because nobody cares about the tweet that she actually tweeted. She is just.
I would say they should do. People should care. Now, if I was looking at Lucy Connolly, obviously I don't know her. Maybe it was totally out of character. Maybe it was a mad moment. Maybe she totally regret. I mean, I don't know, but that's not the question. The question. Okay, the point is the fact that Reform put her on a pedestal like that, and they should have the sense to know, even though she's emblematic of a cause that they're fighting. The justice system is unfair, which I'm not disagreeing with, but the fact that it gives someone a platform because she's come to prominence, her claim to fame, if you like, is only that she put. Well, there's two things really. She put out a really awful tweet, and she was potentially punished too harshly for it.
Yes.
Yes. I think bringing the person in, I think that amounts to give someone a standing ovation and welcome them to the conference. Then I think that really implies, it's quite reasonable for people to think that implies that people don't really think there was much wrong with the tweet, because you're putting forward the person. You're not talking about the case. You're putting forward the person as a heroine, as someone to look up to.
I think I disagree. I disagree with your view. Otherwise, we would not be allowed to celebrate anybody. I don't think that her claim to fame is the tweet alone. Her claim to fame is the fight of tens of thousands of people to get her released from prison. So the and to be honest, I don't think I'm not happy with the fact that people only try to get her out of jail, because there were other people that were jailed for a very long time for, I would say, less aggressive tweets, and nobody cared about them. But because she's a woman, because she has a couple of kids, I think she made the headlines, and she even addressed that. She said, look, it's great that I got out of prison, and it's great that my case got so much attention, but there are other people who are in prison who don't get any attention. And to be honest, just by highlighting that, just by saying, thank you for the attention that I get, but there are other people that should get the attention as well, I think that makes her more than just one nasty tweet.
Yeah, she has more than one message. We'll leave it there. We can agree to disagree on that one. Let's go on to the next one.
Yeah.
Graham Linehan.
Mm-hmm.
So his tweet, basically, if you're a woman, if a trans woman, so-called, comes into your toilet facilities or whatever, kick up a fuss, you're screaming, shout. But then he finished by saying, if that doesn't work, punch them in the balls. Was what he said.
Was in the tweet also something if they do something, because as far as I know, there was something about the trans person actually doing something and the kicking them in the ball as a reaction for them initiating a conflict. No.
But the interesting case to compare this to, a bit of research. So he was arrested and the police have done nothing about it. They've said, okay, no case. There was a case a couple of years ago with someone at a trans rally who said, punch your turf. So punch someone who from the other side, basically. He said, go find a turf, go and punch them. And they were also arrested by the police. I would say quite a similar case. And in that case as well, it was decided that they wouldn't prosecute. No further action was taken. Now, to me, it looks like that's been fairly consistent. And I think, I think I agree with the police. I mean, if someone says punch your turf at a trans rally, do you think the police should take an interest in that or not?
Yes, I think they should. In accordance with the current standards of hate crimes and how they police speech, yes, they should take an interest in it, because they definitely police the other side very, very strongly. So if there was a poster, punch a trans woman or a trans advocate, that person would definitely be persecuted. So and since I believe in equality before the law, I think both should be investigated. On the other hand, at this point, I think neither should be investigated. I think that we are way beyond naughty words.
It's tricky, if you imagine this event where that was said, let's say there were counter protesters there. So in other words, there were turfs there.
Yeah.
And you're saying to the crowd, punch your turf. Now, if you say, I don't know, it's a fine line, it's a grey area, isn't it? If you're saying, right, there they are, go get them, go and attack them now, then that's incitement.
I heard.
Is it possible?
I heard
they said they didn't think she was really thinking anyone was going to do it.
Now, how do you feel about punch a Nazi? Because I've lived with hearing punch a Nazi all my life from Antifa and from the far left in Germany. I've heard that all my life.
I think it's wrong.
So, but I've always it always seemed okay. So I've always lived my whole life, and I'm almost 50 years old. I learned that it's okay to be physically violent towards the right or the far right. And since TERFs are practically Nazis in the eyes of the trans lobby, to me, it makes a lot of sense. Now, as I said, from an equal rights perspective, both should be investigated. Now, with Linnegan, he's a comedian, so I do think that it should be taken into consideration. Also, it is now illegal for a trans person to enter a woman's space, or is it not? Not yet.
No. I think that's a misunderstanding. All the Supreme Court judgment did is it made it clear that spaces can be allocated on the basis of biological sex. If an organization wants to, they are allowed to do it.
Mhm.
It doesn't say that an organization has to do it. It just says they can if they want to. If they feel there are sufficient justifications, they can discriminate on the grounds of biological sex. So it's
Yeah,
it's not very far reaching.
I've been in the online center-right, far-right online space quite a bit. Only the mainstream ones, podcasts like the Lotus Eaters, and I have noticed that people are very careful with what they're saying, but I think by what they're not saying, there is now an acceptance for violence. And I think that this acceptance for violence is a result of the push towards violence from the left and violence against people on the right by the government. So I think people are starting to fight back. And obviously I can't condone that because because otherwise we would get into trouble. So therefore I publicly don't condone it. But you have the questions in totalitarian regimes. At what point are people allowed to fight back physically? If people are being sent for 5 or 7 years to prison because they said people have to fight back against oppression, does that not mean that we're in some ways living in an oppressive regime?
But that's not a genuine case, though. What you're citing there isn't a genuine case. Whose case
I think. So I think we already live in an oppressive regime. Now I would and do not call for violence, but I know that people are outright
got to keep perspective. An oppressive regime, I mean, compared to a North Korea or whatever. I mean, Britain is democratic. I mean, there are, when we talk about censorship and freedom of speech issues in Britain, they really are like nibbling at the fringes, shall we say. Generally, on most issues, there's freedom, but it is being curtailed, and it's concerning that it's being curtailed in some areas. But it was still basically, in most ways, an open democratic society, and the option for changing the government is through the democratic process. And I would have
how would the people that are in prison? So I think Tommy Robinson was very clearly, and I think there's everybody who says no, he was not a political prisoner, I think is not genuine. Tommy Robinson was a political prisoner, and I think if you live in a country where you have political prisoners, and he's not the only one, there are several people that get ridiculously long sentences for minor infractions. And you can say, well, we have the political process. No, these people do not, because they can't get out of prison at the moment. So if people say, I have no course of action What other option do they have? And I'm not advocating for it, but it is coming. You see violence rising. Why is violence rising? Because people feel that there is no alternative option. So the governments better give people alternative options, because otherwise there will be real violence.
The democratic system functions, and that's the option that people have got for a change of government. I think in terms of people,
okay?
When you say political prisoners, I would say there are some people that the state has hounded and mistreated, and trying to find any reason they can to give them a hard time and to shut them up. But I think if we were in a oppressive, if you use the example of Tommy Robinson, I believe he's been mistreated by the state. I also think a lot of the things he says are inflammatory and extremely unhelpful. But I think he has been mistreated by the state. But to keep things in perspective, he's speaking freely to huge numbers of people and is staging events, etc. Now, if we're in a tyrannical, oppressive regime, if they don't like someone who's got quite a following, that they disappear. They're taken out of circulation. So I think we need to keep things in perspective there. Right, come on to my last point, just so we can have my last point. A couple actually. Just pointing out earlier, Just Stop Oil plans to block the M25 motorway, and some of the leaders in that were given 4 and 5 year jail terms for that, which I actually completely approve. Not just because I don't agree with their cause particularly, but if you intend to cause that disruption like that, then fair enough. But the other issue I wanted to mention with regard to reform, and Nigel Farage, is free speech, big issue, and the United States government has talked about these issues, and they've also talked about the buffer zone issues very explicitly. And they've met with some of the people who've been engaged in these cases. Yeah, well, Nigel Farage goes to America and talks to the Congressional Committee or whatever it's called. What does he talk about? Lucy Connolly wanted to take with him, Graham Linehan, etc. Would he talk about the buffer zone cases? No. Now with Graham Linehan and Lucy Connolly, they said things which were, I would say they weren't right. I think maybe they've been mistreated, but the things they said, they shouldn't have said them. But okay, freedom of speech, you defend the rights of people who say things you don't like. But the buffer zone arrest, they were doing things that were absolutely the right thing. But Nigel Farage won't mention those. But that's not in his free speech agenda. And I think that's really revealing.
Reform are not a pro-life party, and they're not a socially conservative party. They are purely a reactionary party, trying to gain votes by the discomfort that the people feel at the moment. And if it's not like a sexy, I would say if it's not a sexy thing, then they will not speak about it. That's Nigel Farage in a nutshell. He waits till something is sexy and he will pick that one up, and everything else he doesn't care about.
Yeah. Anyway, Phil, fascinating as ever. Great to speak to you, and see you soon.
Cheers, bye.
Yeah, bye. Right, let's stay with our next guest. Let's bring on our next guest straight away. So, Ewan, welcome.
Right, good evening. Sorry, I was going to say good afternoon, but good evening, Richard. How's it going?
Good evening. Right, there's a few things we're going to talk about with you, and there's one main one. But just before we go to our main point, I'll just mention this. This is something. Well, let's mention that actually. Our conference, 8th of November, rather, in Glasgow. Get your tickets now. There's a meal afterwards as well. You can find it on our social media. So 8th of November, our annual conference. 14th of September, that is Sunday at the end of this week, 8 o'clock, we're having a social in Aberdeen as well. So do come along, again, details on social media. But I just wanted to mention this. So you'll have seen this story. The Labour MSP has been arrested, and there are suggestions that he'd put secret cameras in toilet spaces in the Scottish Parliament and indecent image charges as well. So very serious stuff. Now, Ewan happened to point out to me that years ago he was interviewed by the Holyrood magazine in a sort of chatty childhood memories. What's your favorite music? What's your favorite food? This sort of chatty sort of interview. And there was something in it that was very interesting in the light of what's come out now. So I just went to go to the site just to see what was there, just to refresh my memory of what was there. And lo and behold, this article has disappeared there. And I suspect it might be because they think it might influence the case, the trial. So maybe there's like a contempt of court issue, and this can't be spoken about. So Ewan and I read this with great interest, but it seems like this has been disappeared from the public realm. So when this trial's over and done with, we could maybe come back again and talk about what was in this article and about, yeah, it'll be an interesting discussion in any case. Now, maybe you're thinking, you've told us so little, maybe you shouldn't have said anything. But yeah, so we'll lay down the marker now, and then in the future, when it's all done and dusted, we can come back to the issue and chat about it again. And just another quick one up in your neck of the woods here. This is a Turriff Academy. Slammed by inspectors. Staff don't treat pupils with respect. Well, I wonder what that could mean. Pupils need more chance to learn about sexual orientation. The report states there are limited opportunities for young people to explore issues of diversity, equality, and discrimination. Staff need to provide valuable opportunities for young people to explore issues relating to equalities, protected characteristics, ethnicity, sexual orientation, and stereotypes. Now, I don't know about you, Ewan, but that makes me think Turriff Academy is probably the best school in Scotland, reading this.
I would say definitely that if you're in Aberdeenshire, it sounds like the perfect place to be sending your children if you're not homeschooling them. And I mean, it's not too far from Banff Academy, which obviously had our conspiracy theory recently about the Banff cats, where basically there were children using letterboxes, and then the council went into damage control and said, oh, and it's not true. There were no kids dressing up as cats and all these things. So it's quite literally complete opposites, just like 10, 15 miles apart. Yeah.
This is a classic example where the school inspectors have got their agenda, and their agenda is schools should be pushing like LGBT content left, right, and center. That's their job. This school doesn't seem to be doing it sufficiently. Well done them. So they get slated in the report. And the negative headlines, poor old head teacher is probably under huge pressure because of this, because he's resisted political and other sort of indoctrination in his school. And that's the price you pay. So that was an interesting story. But Ewan, the main thing Ewan's going to tell us a bit about tonight is the Scottish National Investment Bank. So tell us about this venture. Well, tell us what it is and tell us what's been going on.
So the Scottish National Investment Bank is not a bank. Despite the name, it's actually legally, they say on their website, we are legally not a bank at the bottom, because that's the thing, is they don't actually store deposits or anything. What they actually are is like an investment, I suppose you could call it, an investment vehicle, like a company that invests in other companies. And their whole thing is they invest in really, really high risk businesses with really low interest rates and with public money. So that, for example, they have a lot of kind of ESG focused work. So focusing on, for example, climate change and wind farms and things like that. So.
Yeah. Okay. And how has this money been invested? Is it, are they getting a good return on their investment?
Well, by Scottish government standards, I suppose. But last year they made a £77 million paper loss. And this is essentially, they were profitable in terms of cash, like cash in the bank, but their actual investments dropped so much that they had to write off 77 million. And this is of a portfolio of about 750 million. So it's essentially, it's a 10% loss of the value of their investment.
Now, what's happening, do you think? Are people trying it on because they know the government's sort of a bit naive, a bit gullible, and they'll go for schemes if it's got the right buzzwords in it, or are the investments being made irresponsibly, or what's going on?
Well, in 2023 they wrote off, I think it was about 13 million they wrote off on the deposit scheme, and then the deposit company, Circularity Scotland, actually collapsed, and so their investment of 8 million had to then be completely written off as well. So they lost over 20 million on deposit bottles alone. But then the other thing is they've got other investments in kind of the kind of net zero realm that are really risky. So they've got one called Subsea Micropiles. They're like kind of supports for wind farms and things like that. Then they've got a bottle company that's developing net zero plastic bottles that are free from plastic. They've got investments in all kinds of like ports. There was an ESG enabled smart home system for public tenanted buildings. And there's all sorts of things. You can go onto their website and you can read all the kind of things they've poured your money into. And the thing is, they are making huge losses every year. So as I said, 77 million got written off just last year.
Yeah. Now, when I hear investment bank, I think of a business that makes money by giving loans to enterprises that they feel have got a strong financial future. They make investments and then profit by the success of the enterprises that they invest in. That's what I think when I hear investment bank. But like you say, this is not. This is it a government agency? Is that a fair way to describe it?
Pretty much. It's government funding for things that are, I suppose you could say, that are too risky for the public market. Because the thing is, there are so many companies they call unicorns, which are startups that become over £1 billion or $1 billion. And there's so many of these companies that have started off over the years. It's really easy to find startup funding these days. And yet they've got all these companies that somehow need to come to the Scottish government for funding because nobody will back them.
Yeah. Well, do you think some of them are trying it on? That they realise, so that their whole game plan is to get some money out of the Scottish National Investment Bank. You know what they're like. I mean, they'll give it if we've got the right freezes in it, and we seem like the right sort of people. They'll give us the money. But do you think there's an element of cynicism in people applying for funding?
Well, I think to some extent there's a bit of trying it on for size. Basically, I know one company. I'll leave them nameless because I know this through information I've heard. But they've got things like, they'll have ice cream days, pizza days in. They have like a beanbag de-stressing room, and various other kind of activities and things. And this is a company that is heavily funded by the National Investment Bank, and they're going out and they're doing all sorts of things, and they more or less play about all day with the government money.
Yeah. So what's the future of the Scottish National Investment Bank, do you think? Will it roll and roll and just keep leaking taxpayers' money?
Well, they're only funded, I think, for the next 8 years or so. So eventually they're going to run out of money unless the government gives them more. But also I feel like it's going to become a bankruptcy case eventually, because these investments have proven to be really unwise. And a 10% write-off in the first few years of your bank existing is not a good sign.
No, I think we could agree on that. Right. That's fascinating. I hadn't followed that story very closely until you filled me in. It was a classic case of the Scottish government putting their ideals above like practical common sense. It's like almost pretending that their great ideas, their idealistic ideas, are actually also money making. And the only reason these things aren't being put into practice is there weren't people willing to fund them. But now the government stepped in and they're willing to fund them and get these fantastic schemes off the ground. They're really filling a gap. But obviously, inevitably, that's not what's happening. And money is being wasted on a grand scale. And you can imagine a lot of people are becoming wealthy through these things. A lot of these unsuccessful investments, a lot of people involved in them will be becoming very wealthy through them. And if the business falls at the end of it, well, will they be that bothered? Possibly not. In some cases, they'll have taken a substantial salary or dividends or whatever in the shorter term from it. So, yeah, thank you very much. Have you got any parting shots on that, or is that the I feel I'm in the picture now.
Well, I think that's pretty much the gist of it. I would keep your eye on it. And as I say, if you look up Scottish National Investment Bank online, you can actually have a look through where your money has gone. And they have a big list of all their investments. So if you want to see how they've spent almost £1 billion, then feel free to.
I mean, £1 billion, we're talking about, that's like 2% of the Scottish government's annual budget.
Pretty much, I think, yeah.
Or about the budget of Glasgow City Council for a year. So we're talking substantial sums of money, or well over the budget of Police Scotland for a year. So we're not talking small change here, substantial amounts of money. Right, thank you very much, Ewan. That was very interesting. Keep an eye on us and keep us informed. Maybe come back another time, tell us some more. Gabby. Right, a few minutes to go. Is there parking in the conference? There's parking very close to the venue. There's on-street parking, but there's also a car park within about 3 minutes walk from it. That's not overly expensive. So yeah, parking is pretty easy at the venue. Reform can't do everything everyone wants. Absolutely correct. No party can do that. So therefore, parties have to choose which policy areas to take definite positions on and which policy areas to be more fluid on. That's what every party has to do. For the Family Party, protecting the value of human life is a top priority. Promoting stable family life through marriage, these are top priorities for us. For other parties, they're not their priorities. Right, let's go back to our slides. Let's see what else we've got. We've done that, 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 and that one. This is an interesting one. I was going to talk to Phil about this one, actually, but I forgot. There was a protest at the Parliament, it was maybe today or yesterday, and there's a new group in Scotland called Justice for Innocent Men Scotland. And this group is comprised of, to a significant degree, convicted sex offenders, men convicted of sexual assault and rape, basically. And they're claiming they haven't had a fair trial. So they're obviously not claiming there's nothing wrong with rape and sexual assault. They're not saying that. They're not diminishing the seriousness of those things in any way at all. What they're saying is they were accused of one of these crimes and they think the legal process was not fair to them. Now, obviously, a lot of people who go through court and they don't get the result they want, they're likely to say, oh, they think it wasn't fair. But the interesting thing in this case is a number of top lawyers who are involved in these sort of cases in court are saying, basically, we agree. Men and boys, young men accused of rape and sexual assault are not getting a fair trial because the SNP has done its utmost to rig the system because they want to see more men convicted of rape because they think that will be in the interests of justice. How the SNP knows these men are guilty, I really don't know, but they just want to see more convicted. So a lot of the normal standards that would apply to a criminal trial have been interfered with to prevent a lot of evidence that you or I would say, well, obviously that's relevant to the case, is kept out of court. So I think overall, this group, Justice for Innocent Men and Boys Scotland, overall, I've got a lot of time for them and I wish them well in their campaign because I think there's a genuine issue to be addressed. Is it likely that a few of the men, this protest at the Parliament, were actually as guilty as anything? Is that possible? Very possible. Very possible. But we've got no way of knowing, really. But what we have got a way of knowing is that the system, there are serious concerns about the way the system's operating. And that's not from people who are at the receiving end of the decisions. That's from the people involved in the legal process as defense and prosecution lawyers. Defense lawyers in particular are saying the system is not working and young men are not getting a fair trial when they're accused of rape and sexual assault. And that's a very serious issue. I think the SNP government is incapable of responding to it. They're so totally committed to a 100% feminist perspective that they couldn't even begin to consider these issues. But the pressure is growing with it. The current ESG is it embodies a set of virtues that companies in particular aspire to, and it's where are we? S is sustainability, G is governance, and E is it equality or equity? ESG. I'm gonna ask I think that's it. I think it's equality, sustainability, and governance. Governance meaning there's some degree of democracy within the organization. Environmental, social, and governance. Yeah, so E for environmental, yeah, so it's not sustainable. Social, so basically some sort of benefit to people in society, poorer people, or whatever. For a lot of big businesses, it's become a tick box exercise. So they realize that you get judged on these things, so you try and polish your credentials. And often the way ESG is interpreted, it's in alignment with a fairly left-leaning progressive agenda of the United Nations, some more left-leaning parties. And companies have been going along with this for a decade or more, but they're starting to leave it alone now. They're tending to have withdrawn from it. So that's ESG. Yeah, so that was the protest of the Parliament. That was interesting. I've recorded about the humanists. My video about the polyamorous mice on the BBC is available on YouTube. You can go and watch that. Now, at the start of that video, I did a montage of just one after another BBC reports about polyamory, new so-called news reports. And I put them all on this screen. I can't remember how they were, 20 or 30 or whatever. I mean, they're having a definite campaign to promote sexual relationships with more than two people. And I thought, right, I said, how often do they do anything about heterosexual marriage? And I spoke to soon, they have done something. They did this series, remember it? Called Marriage. So this is the BBC's representation of marriage. And it starts with the husband and the wife having a silly argument over nonsense that goes on and on and on. So its introductory portrayal of marriage is, this is a miserable thing to get into. Whereas there's programs about polyamory, it's all people saying, oh, it's great, absolutely fantastic, or you wouldn't believe how good it is, works really well. Totally one-sided perspective. I've only got a couple of minutes to go. This is curious, isn't it? When I saw the saltire be used in the protests at asylum seeker so-called hotels, I thought, seeing the saltire there, people like the Scottish nationalists, they're not going to be happy about that. And then, lo and behold, here we go. Outrage over use of saltire in anti-migrant campaign. Right, we can debate whether it's an anti-migrant campaign, but it's inevitable that there's going to be this tensions appears, because the saltire for a long time has been regarded as a symbol of the Scottish independence movement, but now it's also become seen as a symbol of a sort of more right-wing, reduce mass immigration, end illegal immigration, that sort of movement. So it's interesting. So it's becoming associated with sort of opposite poles of the political spectrum. How will that end? I really don't know. I don't know. Maybe the Scottish nationalists will drop the saltire and just stick with their Palestinian and whatever the Spanish flags are that they use as well. Right, another very quickly. When we've had events sometimes outdoors, a gentleman and his mob come along called Cabaret Against Hate Speech. And they come along with a pretty powerful PA system and basically try and blast away all that's trying to be spoken at a rally. So, for example, we would have a demonstration. People would try and give speeches, and he would be doing his electrical best to completely overwhelm them and drown them out, which I've always thought is out of order, really. Because if you're having an outdoor event, you've got permission for it, it's a perfectly reasonable thing to do. For someone just to come and try and wreck it with sound, I think is not on. I think the police ought to intervene in those cases and say, no, you can't do that. You can stand over there. You can maybe heckle with the loudest of your voice, but you can't. We don't just want like competitions of PA systems. Anyway, the police have never done anything when they've been there for us. But they went along to one of the 4 Women Scotland events, which are it's the TERFs basically. It's the feminists, but they disagree with the trans thing. And Cabaret Against Hate Speech turned up, they were blasting music out. And it was interesting this. I attended the event. I have a meningioma, a type of brain tumor. I'm pretty sensitive to noise. The volume of the noise allowed by Police Scotland triggered a headache, and pain in my ear. Anything else I'd have left straight away, but for this, I stayed. So it just made me think. Now, I think maybe I've said to the police once, this is not really on. You can't let someone do this. And the police have just been, oh, well, there's no law against it, nothing we can do. But what the lady he's doing is she's acting in the context that we live in, and she's playing the card that she's got some sort of special issue. And so basically she's a victim. She's a victim of the live music, and it's caused medical problems. Now, when I read that, I'm not saying I don't believe it, but I'm saying that there would be people who would want to have that sort of story, to try and dramatize it and to be able to play the victim's card. I mean, if it was so bad, she could have just left, couldn't she? I mean, let's face it. But I would never dream of doing that. So if we were in that situation, I would never dream of saying, right, come on, let's have a think. Has anyone got any medical condition that they think they could complain about so we could get them shut up? My brain just doesn't think about that. That wouldn't cross my mind. But for other people, seems like it does. Let's leave that one. Let's leave that one. It was the March for Life down in London on Saturday. Thousands of people marching there. That was good. And we're just on 10 o'clock, so we'll save the other ones till next week. Lots of very interesting things to talk about next week, but I will discipline myself to finish on time, and look forward to seeing you all next week. And don't forget the conference, 8th of November in Glasgow. You can sign up, get your tickets on our social media, and also on Sunday night this week in Aberdeen, 8 o'clock in the evening, we've got a social event just by the castle gates, just off the square there. We would love to see you. Okay, thanks for watching. I'll see you next week. Good night.